Welcome to The Big Rich Show. This podcast will focus on conversations with friends and acquaintances within the four-wheel drive industry. Many of the people that I will be interviewing, you may know the name, you may know some of the history, but let's get in depth with these people and find out what truly makes them a four-wheel drive enthusiast. So now's the time to sit back, grab a cold one, and enjoy our conversation.
Whether you're crawling the Red Rocks of Moab or hauling your toys to the trail, Maxxis has the tires you can trust for performance and durability. 4 wheels or 2. Maxxis tires are the choice of champions because they know that whether for work or play, for fun or competition, Maxxis tires deliver. Choose Maxxis. Tread victoriously.
Why should you read 4Low magazine? Because 4Low magazine is about your lifestyle, the four-wheel drive adventure lifestyle that we all enjoy. Rock crawling, trail riding, event coverage, vehicle builds, and do-it-yourself tech, all in a beautifully presented package. You won't find 4Low on the newsstand rack, so subscribe today and have it delivered to you. On today's episode of Conversations with Big Rich, we have Clay Egan. For those of you that are new to off-road motorsports and rock crawling, you may not know who Clay is, but if you've watched any of the old videos from the early days of U-Rock and ARCA and some We-Rock, you will see Clay. He was used to compete in an XJ that had some diamond plate on it and was yellow, and Clay is a very motivational person. He's done motivational speaking, and he competed as a quadriplegic. And Clay has got about the best attitude of any person I've ever met. And Clay, I want to say thank you for coming on board and joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me. You know, it's been quite a while since I've had a lot of interaction with anybody in the off-road community, and it's nice to know that I haven't been forgotten. So I appreciate it.
Absolutely, you'll never be forgotten, at least with us old school guys.
Right on.
So let's jump right into it, and let's talk about where you grew up and where you were born and what your early years were like.
Well, early years, first memories were Galveston, Texas, down there in the kind of the South, and just grew up loving the outdoors and spending a lot of time in the sticks. And my dad's job kind of moved us around a lot, and so I spent some time in Utah, and then quite a few years in Sacramento, and then back to Utah, and I call Utah home, but that's kind of where I grew to love the outdoors, love motorsports, and that's really where I got into stuff.
Right, there's a lot of open area in Utah, so that there was a lot of opportunity to get off-road and outdoors.
Honestly, to me, it's the most amazing state on the planet. I mean, you have everything from rock crawling to desert to hunting, fishing, lakes, boating, sand dunes. I mean, whatever your passion is, we've got it right here, so close. I mean, it's been so much fun being able to call this home.
So, how long were you in the Galveston area? Up to about what age?
I was there till I was 5.
Okay, 5. So you probably don't have a whole lot of memory of that.
Well, being that I moved around a lot, in my brain, everything is segmented by places I lived, and so I actually do have quite a bit of memories down there.
Oh, excellent.
And so throughout the other Sacramento and being in Utah, lots of just great memories.
And what time period in your life were you in Sacramento?
So I was there from 78 to 85.
Okay.
So from about the time I was 7 until I was 14.
Okay. I lived in Placerville, California during the 80s and 90s.
Very, very familiar with Placerville. Did some of my funnest Boy Scout campouts up there, and just love that area.
Yeah, it's a great area. So let's get into some of those early year activities. Did you ride motorcycles? Did you hike? I mean, what was the gig?
Yeah, I mean, always kind of into the action sports. I mean, started off, in BMX, and then moved to dirt bikes, and then, by the time I turned about 16, got into high school, then I was racing motocross, and spending a lot of time, riding out in the desert, and then my family was very involved in the outdoors with hunting and fishing. And so, during hunting season, I was in the mountains, chasing deer or elk or, whatever it was. But as far as the motorsports went, I mean, it was always definitely dirt bikes.
Okay. So in school, did you play sports, or were you more of a after school kind of guy and getting out of, doing your own thing, or
No,
scholastic, or?
yeah, no, it definitely definitely wasn't scholastic, man. I was one of those dudes out in the parking lot with the bong, getting into trouble with my dirt bike, on the back of the trailer being towed by a 1981 Buick Regal.
There you
So,
go.
that was kind of my after school activities. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I towed my bike to school and then, snuck out early and went riding. But as junior and senior year, I kind of straightened up a little bit, and got on the wrestling team, and wrestled, and so I did it all. I was very active kid.
Well, cool. So what was your motorcycle of choice growing up?
You know what? It was my YZ 125. I had a 1985 YZ 125. That was what I, started racing. I mean, the very first dirt bike I got was an old 78 RM 100. And, that's where I learned to ride, and grew to love the power band of the old two-stroke motors, and, and then moved up to the 125, and then sold that just out of high school. And the year that I had my accident, had switched to racing quads and was racing our local motocross series on a Yamaha Banshee.
Oh, wow. So let's talk about that accident, if you don't mind, and what the circumstances were.
Sure. So it was, it's coming up on 27 years on June 1st. So it was June 1st, 1994. And I was working construction during the days. I was working at a friend's motorcycle shop at nights, and then I was racing on the weekends. And it was the week after Memorial Day weekend, and one of my cousins called me, and he's like, "Look, hey, your brothers borrowed one of my dirt bikes over the weekend, and they didn't bring it back to me, and I kind of need it for something I've got coming up." And he said, "Do you think you can help me out and and go up and get your bike or his bike and bring it back to him?" And so what my brothers had done is they had borrowed his bike to take my nieces and nephews for rides up at our cabin over that Memorial Day weekend, and then they left it up there, and then they were both out of town for business. And long story short, I'm the one that got stuck into going up and getting it. And so I grabbed my girlfriend and hopped in my truck, and we headed up into the mountains here in eastern Utah in a little town called Samac, which is right at the base of the Uinta Mountains. And got up there, got my cousin's bike, and my girlfriend hopped in the seat of my truck, and I hopped on the bike, and I proceeded to take it, drive it down the mountain road. And as I was going down that main mountain road late that night, I ran into a stray horse.
Oh.
And so, yeah, I mean, it was pitch black. It was like 11:30 at night, and I'm cruising along, and there was a couple of horses that had gotten out of one of the rancher's stables up there and were loose on the road, and I ran into one.
Wow. Okay. I knew it was something to do with a motorcycle. I did not realize it was hitting livestock, and especially big livestock. Wow.
Yeah. It was like running into a brick wall, man. I mean, the horse won.
Yeah.
And from what I was told, the horse kept running, My girlfriend, luckily at the time, was in the nursing field, and she literally saved my life that night. But she told us later that the horses just kept running down the road, and she came up on me, and I was face down in the road. I was bleeding from my head and my face, and I was unconscious, and she literally saved my life that night.
So the injury that you have, where is that located in your spinal column?
So yeah, so I'm what's called a C6 quadriplegic. So the first 7 vertebrae, so from your skull down to the 7th vertebrae, is called your cervical vertebrae.
Okay.
And any kind of break or damage in there is in the quadriplegia range. And then after your C7, which is your 7th cervical vertebrae, then you start your thoracic vertebrae, and that goes T1 on down to T12. And anything below T1 on down is considered paraplegia.
Okay.
And so I'm paralyzed in all 4 limbs. I'm paralyzed from literally the armpits down. Even the backs of my arms are numb. I don't have full sensation, and I don't have full function of my fingers and my hands.
Okay.
I am actually what's called a high class quad, meaning that I function more like a paraplegic because I do have some finger and hand use. They're not great, but you know what? They're good enough to get the job done. They're good enough that I've been able to be, fully independent. And it is what it is. So I'm very blessed that they're as bad as they are, if that makes sense.
Right. So, if you don't mind, let's talk about some of the anguish that you must have gone through. And every time I've met you, and we've been around each other, which has been on quite a few occasions at competitions, especially. You've always displayed such a great attitude. And was that difficult to come to, or what was it a struggle?
Well, it's kind of funny, and I mean, so from the night that I had my accident, they life flighted me from up there on the mountain up to the University of Utah Medical Center, and for the first 6 weeks that I was there, I was fed through a tube through my nose. And, in the early days, I didn't know if I was going to live or die. And, I was that bad off. And so, literally for the first 6 weeks, I never cared if I ever walked again. I just wanted to feel better. I mean, I physically just felt so bad and was so sick with just the trauma to my body. I mean, I'd cracked my skull and broke my cheek, and I was just messed up.
Right.
And so, the early days, I don't ever remember laying there feeling sorry for myself, feeling sad, feeling down. It was just the physical pain and trauma was so bad. I wanted to feel better, whether I was going to die. And, I obviously would felt better if that happened, or just, if God's plan was for me to live, I just wanted to be able to feel better. And so after my body, finally started healing, and I got that feeder tube out of my nose, and, I was able to eat and, and drink on my own and stuff. My strength slowly came, and dude, I was so excited to just honestly be alive and to just start feeling better, that I don't remember ever feeling sad or feeling down about it. I mean, I had great support from friends and family. You've met one of my very best friends, Tyler Quinn.
Yep.
And I mean, Tyler was there from the second I got hurt. And I mean, literally for the first month, he was there every single day. And, it was a 40-minute drive one way for him to come see me. So, I mean, I had amazing, amazing support. And so, it just, honestly, it was not that big a deal mentally and emotionally for me. It was definitely more of a physical challenge in those beginning years. And so, back to your question, I mean, people ask me all the time, how did you stay positive? Well, then I kind of have to go back a number of years later and kind of explain the backstory before my accident of what I grew up with at home. And that is my father. I mean, he was a Korean War vet, very hardcore, very disciplinary, but he suffered from the most debilitating, horrible depression and mental illness that you could ever imagine. So, you think of people, you see in the movies in a straitjacket behind a glass, window, that was my dad. And that's how I grew up. And so home was, for me, its own prison. I mean, I was taking care of my dad from 14, 15 years old on, and he was in and out of mental institutions. He was, a horrible cutter. His mental pain was so bad that he used to cut himself and hurt himself, and he was suicidal, and he was constantly being taken from home. And so, when you're 15, 16, your dad's supposed to be your hero. He's supposed to be there for you. He's supposed to be your best friend. And dude, it was Mr. Hyde, in the Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde version.
Right.
And so, it was bad. And so, I started doing drugs really early on. And that's how I coped with life. That's how I dealt with stuff back then. I was raised not to complain, just, not to show weakness, if you will.
Right.
And so, I did, but I did it, through, hiding that pain and my own inner turmoil with doing drugs. And then to the point where when I was 21, I hit the bottom and tried to take my own life. And my life, was a complete disaster. And so I got checked into rehab and, got cleaned up, sober wise, and decided from that day forward that, I have a choice. I can go through life and blame my dad for all my problems and misery, or I can choose to, be happy and move forward and be a productive, positive, member of society.
Right.
And so, anyways, long story short, almost a year later after I turned my life around, I had my accident. Oh. And so when people say, how did you get through your accident? And I share a little bit about that past, my accident was a piece of cake compared to the way I was grown, the way I grew up.
Understood.
So that's kind of that deep story to how I got through it.
Right. With all that, and you're 21, 22, 23 when the accident happened?
Yep.
And then where did the next phase step in? And I'm not sure what that phase is. So that was, your accident was in
1994.
94. And then I met you right around 2001 or 2, I think. Maybe.
Yeah, would have been 2000. Yeah, 2003 is when I started competing.
Okay.
Yep.
So what was that time frame, a year or two after your accident, to when you got into the off-road scene?
Yeah, so, my dream as a kid, like career-wise, I was never good in school, and I come from a very, very educated family. I mean, all my siblings are all college graduates, have had solid, very successful careers. And then there was me that just struggled all through school. Obviously a lot of that because of my home life. They were a lot older than me, so they didn't live with us when my dad was going through all that crap. And so construction was my thing. I was always really good with my hands and building. I loved woodwork. I loved, building homes. And so, I always wanted to be a builder. And so when I got out of the hospital, I started working on getting my general contracting license, which I did a year later.
Wow.
And started my construction company, Egan Construction. And I built, custom homes and, did all kinds of aspects of of remodeling and additions and, all kinds of, residential and commercial remodeling. And so I did that for a number of years. And then I kind of got to the point where I was like, this is really not the greatest job for a guy in a wheelchair. I struggled to get around on the job site. I struggled to be able to physically manage the jobs like I wanted to, because I just could not get around very well. And so I went to work for a company by the name of Tough Shed. I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
You've heard of Tough Shed. They were all over there. I mean, they still are all over California and nationwide. And I went to work for them in sales, and that's actually where I fell into where I found competition rock crawling, was by working at Tough Shed.
Okay. Now I do remember the Tough Shed. In fact, you had them on your vehicle for a while, if I remember right.
Right. So when I first started, they became my title sponsor and, sponsored me to go around to the different events. I did that, that famous Tough Shed commercial, driving my rock crawler over the sheds and crashing off the other side onto the tin shed. That, I shot that. I filmed that in October of 2004. And I still get texts or calls every once in a while that, from somebody, somewhere that saw it, recently. So they're still running it all these years later. But the whole way I fell into the rock crawling scene was kind of just an interesting story in itself.
Well, we'd love to hear it.
Well, so this was back, in the early, like you said in your introduction, the early U-Rock ARCA days. And Mark and Mike Patey, that used to be, partners with, Craig Stump in the early days of We Rock, after, Craig decided to sell that and kind of move on.
Right.
But Mike and Mark came into my store one day wanting me to build them some tickets, some sheds that they could use as ticket booths for their U-Rock competitions. And they saw some photos of me with some animals that I'd hunted, and were kind of impressed by my attitude and just some of the things I'd done, and I shared with them a little bit about growing up racing motocross and stuff, and then they just basically are like, look, we're promoting this series. We've got this custom rock crawler that is the Cherokee that you talked about, that we really can't use anymore because we're not competing, we're promoting. And they're like, there's nobody in the world like you doing this. They said, why don't you come and check it out, and and you could drive our rig and see what you think. And I'd never met these guys, never heard of them. I'd never heard of competition rock crawling. I mean, growing up with Moab kind of in my backyard, I mean, I knew what off-road what hardcore wheeling was, but I didn't actually know there was a sport. And so, I checked it out, and I went and did some interviews with them. And my very first interview was with Walker Evans.
Oh, nice.
And growing up in, following off-road and motocross, I mean, Walker was like my hero when I was a kid growing up. He's got a cabin up in the mountains here in Utah, not too far from where I crashed and had my accident. And so, I'd been following him forever. And to be able to do that interview with him, that night was like, I mean, I was like a kid in a candy store, man. I mean, I think I was grinning from ear to ear and probably said something dumb just out of kind of starstruckness. But it was definitely a life-changing experience for me.
Well, I can tell you what, we've all had that experience with the number of those guys, whether it was with Walker or, some of the other early, pioneers in off-road racing. Trust me. Rod Hall I've got one of those stories. So, yeah. So then,
well, I believe it. I mean, you've been around, doing it longer than I have, and I'm sure you've talked with all the greatest and probably had the same feeling that I had.
Oh, I'm still that way. Especially in the off-road racing side of it. some of the guys that I meet, I'm just like blown away.
Sure.
So then they say, here's the buggy, set it up what you need to, because I know you had special controls, correct?
Sure. Yeah. So, what we did is I got a set of hand controls, and met up with Mark and Mike, and they were, I mean, the hand controls that I use are very universal. I mean, the same hand controls that I used in my competition rock crawler, I used in my Ultra 4 car, I use in my daily driver.
Okay.
And they just bolt in and out, pedal, the device, bolts underneath the steering column, and then a rod goes down to the gas pedal and the brake pedal, and you run, the gas and the brake just, with one hand.
Okay.
And so I got a hold of a set of hand controls and got it to them, and they got it set up. And then Mark took me down to St. George, in that old area, that was used, for competition back in the early days of rock crawling, that actually is not there anymore. It's,
Right.
I guess it's
All
all been
houses.
built in with houses, but they took me down there and, strapped me in it and just kind of, spotted me around the rocks. And they were really, actually impressed that, that I could do it with the hand controls that I had, and that I just had good, hand-eye, coordination and contact with what was going on. And, they took me up some gnarly, vert walls, and I was able to, go right up them. And they both just, I can remember it like yesterday, they were both just sitting there with these big grins, shaking their head and just like, dude, you're going to be fine. And so I was stoked. And a month later, I went down to St. George with them and entered my first competition.
Awesome. And who spotted you in that first competition?
So the first one was a guy, honestly, it was a guy by the name of Gabe. I don't even remember. I mean, he wasn't from the sport. It was just somebody that I probably suckered into just coming and helping me out. Neither one of us knew what we were doing. I mean, just to give you an idea how naive and how much I did not know about the sport. The very first gate on my very first obstacle, I drove over the front gate going in between the cones. And they're like, 10 points. And I was like, huh? And so I learned a lot that weekend. I got my butt handed to me, but there was a lot of media out there, and I did a ton of interviews. And I mean, I had a blast. I mean, I felt like a rock star out there that very first event. And it just really it all went up from there.
No, that's really cool. And then so when I met you, you had you had a spotter that had spotted you for quite a while.
Right.
And that was
that was Chris Delahunty. Chris has been my best friend since the 8th grade. I talked about Tyler Quinn, a minute ago. Those two guys have been my best friends since the 8th grade. They've been with me like through the best times of my life and through the hardest, most difficult times. And, at times literally had to, carry me through, the rough stuff. But two of the most loyal guys that I ever could have been blessed with to share this life with, And so Chris spotted for me. After that first competition, he was my spotter for the first 3 full seasons.
okay.
We went to 3 supercrawls with the UROC series, the World Supercrawl World Championships. We finished 7th in the nation, as good as 7th in the nation, podiumed a few times throughout that time. I mean, I never won a comp, like I said, I made it to the podium a few times throughout my 6 years of competing, but always felt like I was, somewhat competitive and had some just really good runs where I actually did really well against, a lot of the top drivers out there back then.
Right. I agree 100%. So then those 6 years of competing, when that time frame ended for you, what was next?
Well, so over that 6 years, so I did, competitions with you, with We Rock, with You Rock, and then some old pro rock events. My very last rock crawling event was the Pro Rock National Finals in 2008 in Cougar Buttes, and the first day I was in second place at the finals. Dave Cole was in third place, and I was, dude, I'm not gonna lie, I was feeling pretty stoked that I was in front of Dave.
Excellent.
And I honestly, I don't even remember who was in first. It was somebody that if I could remember his name, you'd be like, oh yeah, he was always in first. But anyways, on the second day of the competition, Dave ended up, beating me out by one cone, and he took second, I took third, and it was a great trip that, to kind of end, the rock crawling phase of things. But at that time, I had built a new buggy and was competing in the XRA, rock racing series. And so I did that 2007, 2008. And then we built the third rig, which was my Ultra 4 car, and raced the 2009 King of the Hammers. And that was back when there was just one class, it was just all of us out there, going for broke. And I had a brand new car, totally wasn't dialed in. I mean, we were still putting the motor in it on the lake bed. And I'm sure, everybody that's competed has been in the same shoes, And so my last race was '09 King of the Hammers. And it was definitely one of the greatest highlights of my whole, rock crawling, rock sport, career events. And so that, just to kind of give you just a quick backstory of that race, that year there was 92 teams, and it was an 86-mile loop. And I drew that year. They just did a random drawing. We drew cards, if you remember, at Pomona,
right?
In October before that, February, and Tyler was my co-driver that year, and we were fourth off the line. And so at mile mark 60, I was in seventh place, and I was in eighth place, and I was gaining on seventh. And I just, I made a tired mental error and rolled the truck, and, lost all that ground. Took Tyler a couple hours to get me put back together. I mean, obviously I'm strapped in, so I can't get out and help him. He got somebody to come over and help him get me out of the buggy, and they drug me over and set me on the rocks while Tyler worked on it. Got us back together, and we finally finished the race that night at like 9 hours and 56 minutes. And it was the longest, most brutal thing physically that I'd ever done in my life. I mean, when I crossed the finish line, they had to literally pull me out of my truck and push me in my wheelchair because I could not lift my arms past my shoulder length. I mean, I was done. But I had kind of a spiritual experience out there on the lake bed that afternoon when I was upside down. And so what happened is, for the longest time, I had been feeling like I've been having just this gut feeling about that I need to kind of back off of the rock crawling and the racing and stuff and focus more on my story. I'm a very religious, very spiritual guy. I've believed always that, God has had a hand in my life and everything that I've been through from the beginning. And I've always believed that he blessed me with this wheelchair and the rock crawling story that I have to be able to share that story to help and inspire others. And so for a long time, I've just been feeling like, God's given me this great gift and this great story. I need to be sharing it. And I had already started, traveling and motivational speaking quite a bit, but it was not my focus. And so as I was laying there upside down in my truck that early afternoon, I said a prayer, and I was just like, God, look, I'm like, I don't ask for much, I'll do whatever you want me to do. I said, I feel like you've wanted me to be speaking and sharing my story. I said, look, if you just help us get this truck back together and finish this race, I'll honor that, and I'll go home and I'll quit racing, and I'll focus on speaking and traveling and and sharing my story. And so I did. And dude, it was the hardest thing I ever had to do. I mean, I was not prepared to keep my end of the deal. I mean, at that point, I wanted to finish that race so bad. And I still think, honestly, I'm the only quadriplegic in the world that's ever, raced that in a 4,400 and finished the race. And it was the greatest, thing, like I said, of my career. But I came home, I sold that Ultra 4 car, sold all my stuff, and I spent the next 6 years traveling and sharing my story to honor that deal I made with God.
That's awesome. So the people that you were speaking to, were they like companies? Were they other paraplegics? Were they, where did you share
What was
your
my
story?
audience?
Yes.
So, I mean, it was all of that. I spoke at corporate events, for businesses. I did a lot of youth speaking at schools and at like boys' homes, for troubled youth. I mean, I connected with them probably more than any of them, just because of my own troubled past. That was where my passion for speaking was trying to help those young kids that were struggling.
Right.
I did a lot of, religious groups. So really anybody that hires a speaker, I did. I mean, I spoke at rock crawling events. I spoke at one of the Lucas Oil off-road race, one of their church events one night. I mean, anything that anybody's ever hired a speaker at, I spoke to.
That is pretty cool. And all over the country, I assume?
Yeah, all over the country, and traveled a lot doing that. And like I said, I did it for about 6 years. I mean, really, I started telling my story, to an actual group. I mean, 2 months after I'd gotten out of the hospital, just because, from clear back then, people were always commenting about just the attitude that I had, the good attitude.
Right.
And, that good attitude has been my meal ticket everywhere. It's been the key to my success. And, we all have stuff that we deal with in life. I mean, we all have challenges, whether it be financial challenges, our jobs, marital challenges, loss of a child, divorce, whatever it is. We all have those obstacles to overcome, and they suck when we're in it. But what I've learned through all of mine is just, if you can find just even one good thing in that bad experience, you grow, you learn, and you go forward a better person. And so I've always tried to share that in my message, when I've, spoke to different groups throughout the years.
That's excellent. I've not always been a very, a real positive person until I met Shelly. And then after I met Shelly, she helped me become more positive. I try to live, we both live our life trying to be as positive as possible, and knowing that like what we put out is what we get back. If we go into any situation with a negative attitude, that's what happens.
Yep.
And we try to remind everybody that, yeah, things can be rough, things can be tough. There's all sorts of different things that can get you down, can weigh on you. It can be, your health. It could, so many things, like you said. But if you really work on keeping things positive, positive energies will come back.
Absolutely. And nobody likes being around a Debbie Downer. I mean, I'm sure you've been around, people throughout your life that just, they're a naysayer. Everything that comes out of their mouth is negative, and, always complaining, and just can't find anything good in the situation, and it's like, I have a hard time being around those kind of people. It's just like, life is too short and too good to just always be focusing on the bad. And it really is a simple concept if people could just grasp it. I mean, it's a choice.
Right.
It's flat out a choice. Sometimes it's hard, changing the way we are, changing our mindset, trying to see the glass, half full, if you will. But I mean, if people can just start getting into, just being aware and catching themselves when, they're being negative, or, seeing the bad in something, instead of, what good can I get out of this? People I think would just be a lot happier in life,
I agree 100%. So since the speaking, so around 2005, 2006, or excuse me, 15 or 16, you haven't been speaking, doing the what have you been doing since then? I know before we started to record, we talked that you've been kind of leading a more sheltered life now and stuff. But have you thought about putting your story down into a book or anything like that?
Well, it's funny as you ask that. I mean, I gave my last speaking engagement on November 4th, 2017, and it was down in St. George, Utah, literally blocks from where that first event happened for me. And it's really where my, my rock crawling story started. And so I wanted to just really kind of, go out with a bang in my speaking. And to be honest, I really got burned out on just telling my story. That's kind of where, it just ended. I wrote a couple of books, so I do have a couple of books out with my story. One is my story. The other book is it's called The Warrior Poet, and it's just a book of poetry of the poems that I've written, throughout the years. I've been writing for 20 years.
Okay.
And anyways, so I just I decided that that was going to be my last talk. And I just at that time had bought some property here in the mountains that had been a lifelong dream, to put a cabin on. And so literally for the last 4 years, I've been building that hunting property up, and building my cabin. And that's where my passion is. I mean, growing up, in a family that hunted and fished, that's what's deep in my blood. I loved the off-road while it was there, but to be honest with you, this old body is shot. I mean, I cannot take bouncing around in a rig for 2 more seconds. I mean, it's hard enough just to get around in my wheelchair anymore without just, feeling beat up. But so I sold all my rock crawlers, I sold my Jeeps, and I have a little, Razor 800 that I use, as my legs when I'm in the mountains, and I just hunt out of that, and that's, that's my happy place. It's literally my happy place, and I chill up there every second that I get.
And are you still good friends with the two individuals you talked about, Tyler and Chris?
Oh yeah. I talk to them both literally daily.
Awesome.
Chris moved to a little town called Lewisburg, Tennessee, a couple of years ago, but he and I still talk all the time. And Tyler, he doesn't live too far from me here, in South Jordan, Utah, where I live. And so, I see him all the time, and we talk almost every day.
That's awesome. That has to help as well.
Well, it does. And I mean, I have always been blessed with the best of friends. I mean, Chris, spotted for me the first 4 years. And then my really good friend, Nick Jenkins, another guy that I consider, one of my very best friends, he took over where Chris, left off and spotted for me the rest of the time. And he lives, close by as well. So, those three guys right there, if you find any old school rock crawling pictures, those three guys are there, and they made it happen. I mean, yeah, I was the face. I was the guy that got all the, the media coverage and the interviews and stuff. But really, I wouldn't be the guy that I am without those three guys. They made it happen, not me.
That's awesome. What is next? Do you have any plans for the future?
Boy, that is a good question, man. I turned 50 this year, so I'm feeling like an old freaking man. And yet, I mean, my body feels like it's 90, but my brain still feels like I'm 17. And I'm sure you can relate.
I can
anybody
relate.
that's been around, anything that, anybody that's passionate about something. I don't care if it's scuba diving or painting. If you're passionate about it, those passions keep us young. And, motorsports and hunting has always been my thing. And they keep me young, mentally. And so I'm just going to keep building my cabin. I got quite a bit of work still left to do. And, I'm still working full time. And so, I stay very busy. I am more than more active, in a wheelchair than most guys in chairs that I know. And, that keeps me healthy too. And so just, literally just building my cabin and spending as much time on the mountain as I can.
Are you still with Tough Shed?
No.
Okay.
No. So I left Tough Shed. So, when the economy tanked back in 07, 08, I left Tough Shed at my 10-year mark.
Okay.
And I just took a couple of years off and focused on my speaking. And then I did that for a couple of years full time. And then I went to work for a Point S dealership, which is a tire and automotive, chain, like Les Schwab or Discount or whatever. And so I went to work for a buddy of mine. Our corporate name's Edwards Automotive. And we have a number of different locations and different businesses under that corporate umbrella, but I'm his CFO. And so I manage all the finances for his business and have been doing that for the last 10 years. And so, it was a really great partnership for the both of us because, I could still speak, I went to work for him in 2011. And so I spoke, another 6 years throughout that time. And, it allowed me to be able to do that and, work full time. And so now I'm doing that and just really just kind of living pretty quiet. I mean, I don't make appearances anymore. I don't speak anymore. I mean, this is literally, Rich, with you, the first interview I've done in years. So
well, I appreciate it.
And I appreciate you, like I said, remember me and thinking of me because, it's kind of, I'll be honest. I mean, the whole being out of it is a little bit of a salt in the wound kind of thing, if you will, because I miss it. I miss all my friends, yourself, Little Rich, all the rest of the old school gang that I cut my teeth in the sport with, and I don't see anybody anymore, but, that's about it.
There's not a whole lot of them still competing from back in that mid 2000s, unfortunately.
Sure.
There's Josham just came back and is spotting for Randall Davis in Cody Wagner's Jesse Haynes Fab car. But, most of the old school guys, I still see a lot of them from, I'll see Dean Bullock when I'm down in Cedar City and stuff, but,
sure.
And hang out with, go by and visit Jason Pauly when I'm up in South Dakota or something. But, there's not a whole lot of them still competing from back then. So
right. That's because we're all a bunch of old men.
Yeah, yeah, aren't
You
we?
know,
I keep telling
funny.
everybody that.
Is anybody listening?
I don't know if they're listening to me or not. I don't know if anybody ever listened to me.
Well, I always enjoyed your company. I always enjoyed, our chats and loved your competitions. I mean, my last We Rock event was probably August of '08 there in Cedar City. And it was one of the most memorable, funnest events that I ever competed in. I mean, you guys put together just some killer courses that year, and that was just a really really fun course, and always fun to be close to home so the friends and family could make the trek to come watch.
Right.
And but that Three Peaks area has just got some awesome rocks. I always love being there.
Yep, we were just there 2 weeks ago for our Western Series opener. So,
Awesome.
yeah. And next up on our schedule is Delta, Utah. We took over what Craig Stump called Old School, and
Yeah.
we're now calling it the Delta Classic. So
Oh, awesome. Now, when is that?
that'll be Memorial Weekend, the Friday and Saturday.
Oh, it is. So just next week then.
Yes, next week. Yep.
Wow. So yeah, so you took over the dates and everything.
Yes, absolutely.
That's awesome, man. Yep. Well, that's a super fun course too.
Yes, it is. And it's just a great event because for us, it's not near as much pressure as a season event.
Sure.
And we get so many new guys coming out to that are just, the whole idea is to get them hooked and get them to enjoy the sport beyond just trail wheeling.
Right. Oh, that's awesome, man. Now, what? This is a little bit off the subject, but what's Little Rich doing these days? How's he doing?
Oh, he's doing great. He's living down in the Sand Hollow Hurricane area.
Okay.
And he's got a family and 2 kids, and he actually runs an event called Trail Hero that happens every October.
Okay, I have heard of it.
Yeah, he runs that event.
Awesome.
Yeah. So it's we're still all in it. I don't know how many more years I'm going to be doing it. I've 21 years now.
Dang.
I'm 60.
Good for you, man. That is so awesome.
And at
not many guys can say that, dude.
Yeah, I know. And at 63, I don't plan on doing it for another 21.
Well, I know what it took for you guys to put on those events, man, and just how much work and not always the best conditions weather-wise, and you still made it happen. And I was always very appreciative and always grateful for what y'all did.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. Yeah, there's the one thing, like I always tell everybody, there's no rain delays. We either run or we cancel.
Yeah.
And we don't like to cancel unless it's dangerous.
Right.
So,
well, I think we've all raced and competed in the best conditions, but the worst as well.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. So is there anything that we haven't touched base on that you would like to talk about? Or, do you have any questions for me that that you can think of?
I mean, not really, Rich. I mean, we kind of covered all of kind of what I've had going on, and you covered my story good, and what are your events these days? I remember back in the day you were doing some rock crawling, but some kind of rock racing. Are you still kind of doing that format, or are you just back to strictly old school competition rock crawling?
Just competition rock crawling. At one
Good
point we were doing VORA, Valley Off-Road Racing Association. We did that for about 4 years. And then we got into doing dirt riot races, which was, kind of a grassroots, for the 4400s and all the classes that Ultra 4 is. And we stopped that in 2019.
Oh, wow.
And actually, we were doing 21 events a year at that point.
Dang, dude.
And it was
That's
just
too much almost.
Yeah, it was too hard. It was great when I had people
Good
traveling.
Help.
Yeah, help.
Yeah.
But I've been doing this now for about 5 years now, just Shelly and I. And I get help at some of the events with some of the drivers or old drivers coming in and, competitors coming in and helping, either set up or tear down, or guys sticking around an extra day to help tear down and load up. But, pretty much it's still, 90% of it is physically me. And it's just, it's getting, it's hard.
Yeah.
Especially
No,
doing 21. 7 nowadays, or 8 is a lot easier.
Yeah. So is that how many you're doing these days? Is 8?
Yeah, this year we'll do 8. We'll do
4 West Coast and 4 East Coast?
No, it'll be 3 East, 3 West, Grand Nationals, and then of course Delta Classic.
Oh, gotcha. Okay.
Yeah. So we're happy with that. It stretches the season out, and I don't have to do back to back to back to back. There was one year where I had like the last 6 events were all weekend to weekend to weekend to weekend. And I was
Dang.
going across country as well.
Yeah.
Getting done with a rock crawl in New Hampshire on Thursday or on Sunday, and then having to be ready for practice at a dirt riot race in Texas, 2,200 miles away, by Friday. So
Dang.
yeah, that was.
Yeah, that's rough, dude. That's a lot of travel, a lot of hard work, man.
I can't drive that many hours anymore.
Yeah, you and me both. 3's about my max in any kind of road trip. And I mean, that's why, when I say I'm leading kind of a quiet life, I mean, my body, dude, is shot. I mean, I beat it and abused it. And, it's just, I'm uncomfortable in pain 99% of the time.
Right.
And so to sit and drive, for more than like here to St. George or more than, from here to Moab, I just won't do it. It's just it's just no fun anymore.
It makes sense.
So I feel your pain, man. That long haul traveling stinks.
Yep, we avoid that now. We still make the long trips, but we take a lot longer to do it. So.
Well, good for you. And your wife's doing good. Shelly's hanging in there, and
yes,
all's well there.
Yep, everything's great. She's got a whole bunch of little businesses going on, and we're still doing the rock crawl. We got an off-road magazine that we produce, and of course the podcast, and then we have a all-natural skincare product line, and a boutique
Sweet.
hotel, and all sorts of different things that we're doing.
Well, good for you, man. It's good to be busy.
Yes, it is. Well, Clay, I want to say thank you so much for coming on board and telling your story, and hopefully people will get inspired, and think about, the positivity in their life, how positive life can be, and, kind of shoo those bad thoughts out of their mind and work toward being positive.
Absolutely, man. I mean, it literally, like I said earlier, is the key to success, man. And, success comes in all forms, whether it's financial success or, job success or marriage success or, just friendships. I mean, it all plays into being successful, and, being positive and just trying to find the good in things is so important.
I agree 100%. So, Clay, I'd like to say thank you for taking the time to talk with us and share your story with our listeners. And, I hope you all the fortunes and good luck, that you can afford in the future. And, I'll pray for you that your pain is minimized, and, that everything runs smooth from here on out.
Well, I appreciate that, Rich. And I pray for the same for yourself, and, like I said earlier, I appreciate, you having me on and all the years of friendship and just, camaraderie. It's been a lot of fun. So, thanks again for thinking of me.
All right, Clay. And I will get in touch with you and let you know when we're going to air this episode. And again, thank you so much.
Cool. Sounds good, man. Really great to talk to you.
Okay. Have a nice evening.
Take care.
All right.
You too. We'll see you.
Okay. Bye-bye. If you enjoy these podcasts, please give us a rating. Share some feedback with us via Facebook or Instagram, and share our link among your friends who might be like-minded. Well, that brings this episode to an end. Hope you enjoyed it. We'll catch you next week with Conversations with Big Rich. Thank you very much.